of their body? How can you give them adequate compressions? How can that person breathe as you continue pumping my son's chest that has a bullet in there because the bullet never exited his body? Nolan vehicle dash cam was not working that night. And his supervisor knew it wasn't working that night, but yet he told him to drive that vehicle anyway on the detail to a DUI checkpoint. He had no dash cam, no body cam. And yet the supervisor told him to still drive that vehicle. How can you be on a detail without your dash cam to show if anything should happen, such as what happened to Jarvis? Would be evidence that, you have. So on December 30th, at 5:30 in the morning, there was a knock on our door. And it was the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the medical examiner at my door. I opened the door and I look at them and I'm like, may I help you? And he said, Lights family? I said, yes, I'm Kathy. Can I help you? Jarvis Lights. I said, yes, can I help you? He said, is there anyone else here with you? Because what we need to tell you is not good. So I run, I wake up my husband, Jarvis' dad. I ran, I woke up his two sisters. And I told them that there was a police officer at the front door about Jarvis. We all gathered in the living room. And what he told us was that Jarvis had been killed that night when he should have been at work. And I lost it. I went into complete shock. I screamed, I hollered, I couldn't believe it. And his words became mumbled in my ears because of my screaming. I couldn't even understand what he was saying. When I was finally able to come back to myself and was able to speak, I asked them, could I please go to the hospital to ID my son, because I didn't believe this was my son. And the medical examiner told me that I couldn't go ID my son. I asked him why. He said because my son was already being transported to the GBI lab for an autopsy. So I didn't even get a chance to see if that was my son. And the next time I saw my son was on January the 6th, 2018, in his coffin. May 7th, 2019, the district attorney decided to found probable cause to hold a grand jury trial. And she did it inside a grand jury room where we were not allowed to be in that room as she presented Jarvis' case. And we, were able at the end to go in and talk about his character. But by that time it was too late because her presentation had already set the stage for what they were going to decide on what to do. So we goes in there, speak on my son's character. Jarvis was a father. He was the father of 3 girls and 1 son that he lived his life for. He worked hard for, who was bonded like a father to his children. Jarvis and his kids were so strong with their love. And he was so respectable. He was mannerable to the elderly, to the community. He was an advocate to the youth because he wanted to see those youth grow in something to benefit their lives. So you all want to talk about my son. You want to victimize him and make him seem like he's a horrible person. But that's because that's to make you feel like you're the victim and Jarvis the suspect. We have turned our pain into a passion for awareness and transparency of the injustices that families should not have to face with police officers and suffering the burial of their child. Since the death of our son, there have been many more lost loved ones added to the list of unnecessary police use of deadly force against the public in Georgia. Families have joined collectively in pushing for legislators to pass bills that will hold police officers accountable for their actions, for racial profiling traffic stops, unethical behavior, and community engagement with police. Local and state police officers should not be investigating other officers and officers-involved shootings. We need federal investigation with local police killing a person. In the state of Georgia, the Washington Post has documented almost 400 people shot to death by police during the year 2015 to 2024. Let me share with you the names of them who were the children of my sisters and brothers in this fight for justice and accountability. Jimmy Atchison, Javis Benjamin, Leadon Boykins, Rayshard Brooks, Kevin Davis, Quindavia Q. Hicks, Eric Holmes, Julian Lewis, DeAndre Phillips, Jabril Robinson, Kane Rogers, Dendrick Stallings, Andrew A.J. Smyrna, Shali Tilson, Vincent Truitt, Anthony Hill, Alexia Christian, Nicholas Thomas, and let me add Jayla McKenzie, a Georgia resident killed by police in Memphis, Tennessee. With my testimony today, I am submitting a written inventory of every person shot to death by law enforcement in Georgia over the past decade. The opportunity to have the case of my son, Jarvis Lights, reopened with a special federal prosecutor and to have our civil lawsuit revived will bring victory, peace, and closure to our family and to countless others. Police unions shield members from accountability for their actions, including coaching officers involved in excessive use of force incidents on how to write favorable reports and have them collaborate to present a narrative that exonerates them from blame and place fault on the suspect. Police unions are the major stumbling blocks against law enforcement reform. California's largest police union has spent $3 million in the last 3 years on its political operations. Abolish qualified and sovereign immunity and amend federal law 42 U.S.C. 1983 to ensure law enforcement officers will be held personally liable for violating citizens' constitutional rights. Pass Abolishing and Ending Qualified Immunity Act and expand it to cover all law enforcement agencies on every level. Impacted families are calling upon Congress to take immediate actions to abolish qualified and sovereign immunity for all law enforcement officers, ensuring accountability for excessive use of force, brutality, and wrongful death of all people. Does it have to happen to you for it to matter to you? Step it up.
I know all y'all personally as well. I know everybody, all y'all here, right? But sometimes when we hear you guys say the stories, not the stories, I don't want to just minimize some stories, right? When we talk about what you have to endure over and over and over, there are certain pieces that always just resonate with me and just sticks with me for a little while until I hear y'all speak again and something else jumps out. But today, there's also another common thing that I'm seeing of when your families, when the mothers, you all are notified. How much time is transpiring between when your loved ones are murdered to when you're notified? And I bring that point up because thinking about the bills you guys are working on, talking about qualified immunity, talking about excessive use of force, right? We also want to be clear that that's a blockade for them to create their narrative, for them to create their story, for them to sit down with their fellow law enforcement officers and say the best way, how are we going to spin this, right? Exactly. And I bring that point up mainly because as you guys embark on going to speak with Congress, my question to you all is, how do we galvanize them to understand that all you're asking for is a level playing field? That's what you're asking for. And I'm not minimizing the work that's happening, but essentially, in the qualified immunity doesn't give them a thing to hide behind. Dealing with excessive force doesn't give them the opportunity to say, I was scared for my life. Is that going to stop them from murdering us? And I hate to ask that question in that manner, but I'm really asking because, again, we're asking to level the playing field. We're asking for equal access to the information. It shouldn't be a reason why you can't view your son's body until he's in the casket. So how do you all feel these changes you're calling for, or what do we need to do to get those changes to build upon? What else is there? You get what I'm saying?
So there's a quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and I'm absolutely not going to get it right verbatim, but when he talked about, in essence, that I can't get somebody to not hate me, but we can create laws to stop you from killing us, in essence. And there's been, I say that to say, there's been so much conversation around passing laws and accountability and such. But in my opinion, that's still not addressing the culture of policing in and of itself. The history of policing, slave catching in policing, and just how it has continued to manifest and take on different faces, but it's still in essence the same thing. You are chasing, tracking, killing, lynching Black bodies still. So until there is a shift in the culture, and by that I mean, who are you hiring? It's a certain type of look that they are looking for when they hire. I believe it may have been Geraldine that mentioned the issue with the officer having PTSD. Well, the law enforcement has a lot of former military who have been in all of the conflicts over the last 25 years, going back to Iraq, Kuwait, Afghanistan, and all of those who have come forward since. So the culture needs to be addressed, but the culture can't be addressed if you don't have courageous elected officials who are willing to push for the shift. That's what's going to have to happen. As my sister said earlier, the FOP and the money that they have behind elected officials has to be busted up. And I ran for office back in 2023 against an incumbent, and I am saying to us that it is going to take more of us to run and get in those seats, because I will say it to the day I die, on this side of heaven, I've already taken the greatest loss. So there's not no money for me to be bought into anything. And we have to have those kind of people with that kind of mindset to get into these seats so that we can shift that culture.
I repeat it, Captain. I was just simply saying, I love the advocacy. Let me be clear too, around qualified immunity and use of excessive force, right? But again, being in this fight, I also understand that that's just, it's not just, I'm not minimizing to just. It's a means to leveling the playing field. It's a means where they can't hide behind a thing. We still have families have to go to court. We still have to meet with the prosecutors. We still got to do all of the things, right? All we're doing is taking away their privilege of saying that they're going to kill us with immunity. So what I'm asking is, how do you interpret, let's say we get this passed, let's say this is successful, which it will be, let's claim it now, right? It will be. When it's successful, how do we envision what's next? And I'll be clear for everybody, it's not just for panelists. I asked that question because, and we talked about this outside, Kathy, when we go to Congress and the threat of advocacy and the threat of removing people out of these damn seats. If you're not going to stand up and do the right thing, how do we put pressure on them? The communities that we service, it's numbers game. And I hate to say that a lot of the times, Because y'all voices is actually just as powerful as numbers, but the problem is they have to feel threatened. They have to feel threatened. So I'm only asking that question because I want folks who's watching this panel to understand that y'all didn't just create this advocacy out of thin air. It didn't just happen. It's a collective experience of what we've all went up against, and it's no reasoning that qualified immunity, one statement, I feared for my life and I don't have to do this, is the reason why our loved ones' murders go unjustified. So that's why I'm asking the questions, not to interrogate y'all. It's to really get an understanding of how do we get this out to the public and make them understand how important this really is.
For me, I feel as though getting these bills and laws passed is very influential in a start. And then, like you said, by having them not to be able to hide behind this, I fear for my life, qualified immunity, and also having our elected officials to stand up and hold them accountable, I think in personal ways, and taking things away from them, actually having officers prosecuted, giving them life in prison for murdering, taking their pension, doing those type of things, making it personal, even after these laws have passed, so that they would think twice before they murder, and just holding them personally accountable.
Thank you.
My opinion to the answer to your question, Victor, we are here, we are discussing, our vision is on qualified immunity, and that's where we should keep our vision at. Stay focused on the fight to end qualified immunity. Whatever you do, I know there's so many other fights going on, but our vision today is on ending qualified immunity, and that's where our vision needs to stay at. Anything else, deal with it. But right now, let's stay focused on ending qualified immunity and passing the Ending Qualified Immunity Act.
Two quick things that emerged for me. First of all, thank you again. I don't know how else to express the honor I feel to just be here to receive your testimony, so thank you. Were the concepts of enforcement and transparency. You mentioned that in a state that's an open carry state, they came after him because they said he was holding a gun. And so I want us to always think about the laws that we pass, the rights that we have, the rights that are how are they enforced? Because they don't apply to everybody. So hopefully, when we pass qualified immunity, when we pass standards, when we pass all the other policies, I think that's only the first step. It's a big step, but it's the first step, because the unequal and selective application of existing laws is a huge problem that we have to face after that. The other issue of transparency, you said you weren't allowed to be in the room during the grand jury. And this is an issue of political power, because these police associations, police fraternities, whatever you want to call them, they have that political power because of their donations, because of their relationships with elected officials, to bargain away the rights of the community, to be there in those spaces, in those meetings, advocating for our own rights. So I think this question of who's running for office, who's funding your campaign, how much are they funding, and for what reason? These are questions we should be asking, regardless of the candidate, whether the candidate is white, black, man, woman, whatever. This is our fight, is to expose that political bribery and counter it with opposition that is clean, that is not beholden to these political machines that the other side has set up to basically take away our rights and protect themselves. So thank you for highlighting some of those things for us.
To that point, I think that all of our organizations have got to have a civic engagement arm to our organizations. Because what I have learned in knocking on doors and being out there on the canvas is our community, somewhere a disconnect happened. The civic engagement that used to be is no longer. So when you have millions of 30 and under that don't show up at all to even use their voice and their vote, that's a foul. That's a foul. And so we have to have our organizations having a civic arm to it so that we can understand, get people to understand what is connected, how it is connected, and who is holding us from getting the thing that we need. That person sitting in that seat.
100%.
And I am one, I don't provide cover. I don't care if you look like me. We've all heard skin folk ain't kin folk. It's time for us to be about that for real. So providing cover, absolutely not. But that civic engagement piece, I think, is very important for all of our organizations to have.
I appreciate that. I'm going to add one quick thing. Adrienne, you mentioned this. I think your comments around who's running for office and how, and your experience is really key, because part of that civic engagement needs to be, yes, we are trying to get the right folks in the right office within the system, and then the work begins, because you're not just trying to be a part of the status quo of the system as is. You're trying to change it from the inside. And I think what happens is once people gain these seats, all of a sudden folks are sitting pretty. And why am I going to kick the bucket of my biggest funder? Because that's not the reason you got into this place to begin with. And I think we got to keep reminding folks of that. So I appreciate that.
Let's give them a hand and thank them for their testimony. Thank you so much. A few very brief reflections as we prepare for our next panel. One statement that I'll be using frequently from here on out: it does not have to happen to you for it to matter to you. Very important words, and I thank you for sharing it with us. Also, I appreciate the corrective to the language. Rhetoric is important, that we get to the right word that expresses the right concept is exceedingly important. And so this corrective to our statement about justice, to expand it to include accountability. Another one of my favorite Hebrew words is the word tesdik, which means justice, but it doesn't just mean justice, it means righteousness. But it doesn't just mean righteousness, it means the work to create a just society. And so with that expanded view and understanding of justice, I think that's what we're getting at. We cannot repay anyone or replace anyone for the life that has been lost, but we can work to create a just society fueled by that loss. Two other very quick things. I had the chance to write the foreword to a book by a woman who's now a dear friend, the Reverend Sharon Risher. You may know that name. Reverend Risher's mother, Ethel Lance, was shot 8 times at point blank range at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Matter of fact, I was with Reverend Risher when her book was on the Today Show. We were in Manhattan together speaking with Craig Melvin. One of the things I heard in this past testimony is that every time we hear of police violence, it opens the wounds all over again. And so I appreciate that important recognition that it's not just the initial injury, but it's how it's visited upon you again and again, and maybe even in the most unexpected times. Maybe it's when you desire to eat those meatballs once again that you experience the totality of that loss. But I appreciate how you are humanizing your loved ones. Not just a name, certainly not just a hashtag, but for many of you, those whom you carried in your womb and birthed into the world. Which brings me to a final consideration as we bring up our next panel, which is that maybe your womb has shifted. Maybe you're still giving birth to your children. Birth through your activism. Birth through your words. Thank you so much for your witness. Our next panel includes Anita Wills, honoring Kerry L. Baxter Jr. from Oakland, California. Kerry L. Baxter Jr. Say his name. Kerry L. Baxter Jr. Say his name. Kerry L. Baxter Jr. Say his name. Kerry L. Baxter Jr. And please, the names are so important. If by chance I misspeak, I sometimes get tongue-tied. Please help me to make sure that we are saying the names correctly. Pamela A. Brooks, honoring, I believe, Amir Damani, is that correct? Amir Damani, from Capitol Heights, Maryland. Amir Damani Brooks. Say his name. Amir Damani Brooks. Say his name. Amir Damani Brooks. Say his name. Amir Damani Brooks. Rhonda Dormius, is that correct? Honoring Corinne Gaines. Say her name. Corinne Gaines. Say her name. Corinne Gaines. Say her name. Corinne Gaines. We honor you for your testimony. Give them a hand as they come.
Hi, my name is Anita Wills. I'm Afro-Indigenous, a member of the Monacan Indian Nation, residing in the San Francisco Bay Area. Before I start, I want to give recognition to the Anacostans and the Pamunkey, whose land, unceded land, we're sitting on. And I want to give honor to the slaves who built Washington, D.C. Let's not forget who's responsible for this, where we sit, whose land we're on, and whose labor built this land. I'm an author, activist, and legacy fellow with Mothers Against Police Brutality. I met Colette years ago, when Movement for Black Lives first started. We went to the first convening, and Colette paid for us to go. This was after my grandson was killed. My oldest grandson, Kerry L. Baxter Jr., was beaten, chased, and shot in the back by the Oakland police on January 16, 2011. After California's three-strike law sent his father to prison, Kerry became a target for the police. Officers would harass him on the streets, threatening that they were going to get him. He told me, "Grandma, they're going to kill me." Once, And once an Oakland officer had put his finger to Carrie's head like it was a gun. And the reason they were after him is because they go around harassing families. They were harassing him because I was supporting my son. I was writing, blogging on Facebook about my son being innocent. And we were filing appeals on behalf of my son. And Oakland Police Department is nothing but a gang. That's all it is. And they have a history of threatening young black men and killing young black men. When Carrie was 19, we spent New Year's together at my younger sister's house. He was living with his mother then. He had often lived with me. After his dad went to jail, to prison, I would go get Carrie and my other grandson. They spent a lot of time with me. Carrie spent his whole middle school years with me because he was afraid of the police. And I would take him to school and pick him up every day to make sure that he was safe. When Carrie was 19, we spent New Year's together at my younger sister's house. He was living with his mother and younger brothers in Oakland. Normally we played games and Carrie would join in, but that night he looked dejected and sad. As I was dropping him at home, he told me that the police were harassing him and had taken his ID. I told him to just call me and I would take him to get a new ID. I explained to him that the police do not give you IDs. They have nothing to do with that. That's the DMV. And I was waiting for him to call, but that call never came. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday, Carrie Jr. was killed in front of an Oakland church near San Antonio Park, beaten, chased, and gunned down around 10 p.m. No ambulance was called, and witnesses stated that Oakland police were there almost instantly and didn't allow anyone near him. According to witnesses, Carrie lay on the ground in front of the church for over 4 hours. Neighbors told us that a big black police van arrived almost immediately and parked by his body, but no medics were called. The priest at San Antonio Catholic Church later told me that the police stopped him from delivering last rites. About 1 a.m., someone banged on my door, and I did not answer. Police would also often do that to me because, as I said, they were harassing me. So I thought it was them. About 3 a.m., his mother called wailing. They killed Carrie Jr., shot him through the heart. I pulled myself together, and when I opened my door, a card from the coroner's office fell into my hand. The coroner had knocked earlier, even though they knew Carrie Jr. lived with his mother in Oakland. I didn't live in Oakland. Carrie had been lured to the park by 2 women. One was a former girlfriend, and both were being trafficked by Oakland police officers, an open secret known by most in the community. In our community, police patrols are known to operate like gangs. At a motel nearby, the girls were forced to turn tricks, and the cops beat up their pimps. I spoke with Carrie's ex-girlfriend that very night at his mother's house. She lied that Carrie lay in her arms after he was shot. There was not a drop of blood on her clothes. This disturbing backstory of prostitution and corruption is, I believe, part of the reason I've had such trouble getting official information from the police about that night. The neighbors that I spoke to told me that Carrie was being chased. He was being chased by this man. He was a black man dressed in black. And the girlfriend had said that her friend that they were with had got on the phone and made a phone call because Carrie had taken them down to that park. And then 2 black men dressed in black came and began beating Carrie up. So they beat him up, and one chased him around the corner in front of the church and shot him center mass. And he probably was dead before he hit the ground. And that's, this is disturbing backstory of prostitution and corruption, and that is, I believe, part of the reason I've had so much trouble getting official information from the police about that night. Carrie Jr.'s case went cold almost immediately. I filed a complaint with the Oakland Police Review Board and Internal Affairs under a police officer, after a police officer suggested I tone down my rhetoric if I wanted my grandson's murder solved. He knew I'd been blogging on Facebook and working with the Oscar Grant Committee. The Police Review Board and Internal Affairs closed their investigations and refused to provide me with copies of their reports. And they were using the immunity law for police. They've been using that to withhold the report from me. I requested 2 California Attorney Generals, Kamala Harris and Rob Bonta, to intervene, but both declined. The highest law enforcement officials in the state, yet they refused to investigate or even question the police. Only about 20% of the murders of Black men in Oakland are solved, and I believe that is by design. Carrie Jr.'s case remains unsolved to this day. I became an activist for justice in his name, Carrie L. Baxter Jr., and for all of us plagued by state-sanctioned police violence. And I want to say this. This is what I read at his funeral. In due time, their foot will slip, for the day of their disaster is at hand, and their doom hurries to meet them. And I was also, another reason that I wanted to put out why I'm having problems in Oakland is because there are other mothers and family members whose children have been murdered and they're unsolved. And the police approach them and tell them they know who it is, but they can't arrest them. So they have an organization that comes out and supports the police against the community. So I ran into that while I've been, in Oakland, living in Oakland. I'm not living in Oakland, but trying to get justice in Oakland for my grandson. I'm dealing with the opposition of these mothers whose children were murdered, and the police have told them that it was somebody in the neighborhood, but they don't have enough evidence to arrest them. And they tried to tell me that. And I said, you lied, because in the first place, you told me he was killed by a drive-by shooter when the neighbors saw a Black man dressed in black chasing and shooting at my son. And they were, and also, the one last officer I spoke to, which was in 2019, I went to the police department and spoke to him by myself. He said that same lie. And I told him that. I said, the neighbor said, and we had shell casings right there in front of us. They had shell casings from whoever killed my son, sitting there from the evidence box they have about my grandson, rather, not my son. But, so I told him that, and then he went back to give me a card, and this dude is an FBI agent. So to me, it's like the FBI is supporting what the Oakland police is doing, because my grandson's case is cold. You got an FBI agent sitting there talking to me, and they can't solve that with 2 witnesses. I don't think that it's just us getting the police. I think it's us getting at this system, because the system is what's backing the police and changing the laws, and not only changing them, but making sure that once they are changed, they're enforced. Because otherwise it makes no sense, because they got all these laws on the books already that they're not enforcing, especially when it comes to us as people of color. They don't enforce anything that has to do with them respecting our rights as people of color. That's what I want to say.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pamela Brooks. I serve on the board of the Coalition of Concerned Mothers as the Director of Community Outreach. I'm a survivor, a mother, and the voice of Amir Damani Brooks, my youngest of 3 children, who was born on January 15, 1997. Amir was a charming, lovable young man who enjoyed playing the drums and riding dirt bikes. He was selfless and willing to help others in need. At the time of his passing, Amir was enrolled in barber school, and he was eagerly anticipating the purchase of his first expensive pair of clippers. He had an appreciation for life and all its offering. Amir was a precious gem within our family, and his loss has left an impenetrable void. On August 4th, 2014, Amir and his cousin Nigel were riding a dirt bike around our apartment complex in Capitol Heights, Maryland. An off-duty Prince George's County, Maryland police officer, Brandon Peters, who was working security at the time, mistakenly identified the bike as being involved in an earlier robbery that occurred 8 weeks prior. Despite being instructed by a dispatcher to disengage, Officer Peters pursued Amir and his cousin in his police vehicle, chasing them onto the Maryland Highway median and crossing into Washington, D.C. Amir crashed into a tree and sustained severe injuries. Officer Peters exited his vehicle, observed Amir and his cousin, and then departed from the scene without rendering any aid. Amir succumbed to his injuries 2 days later on August 6, 2014, at the age of 17. I was left struggling with the realization that our prayers had been answered according to God's will, rather than our own desires. As I left the hospital without my son, I was consumed by a multitude of questions. How could my vibrant child have been fighting for his life in surgery hours earlier? Why did the medical staff inform me that Amir's heart had stopped at the scene? How could he have suffered such an extensive blood loss requiring 50 pints of blood upon arrival at the hospital? How could my child not have survived? A subsequent investigation revealed no evidence linking Amir or his bike to the alleged robbery. Officer Peters had violated department policy by initiating a pursuit for a minor infraction. Moreover, he was not assigned duty or receiving compensation from the county at the time of the incident. Officer Peters faced no disciplinary action and was later promoted to sergeant, while my civil case was dismissed by the court. The loss of my son has led me to question my faith, strength, and life's purpose on numerous occasions. Although my faith remains shaken, I'm trying to entrust my concerns to God. I believe that God will not burden me with more than I can bear. God remains in control, and He is the sole source of strength that can sustain me through this ordeal. Amir's passing has left a huge void within our family. My daughter struggles. My daughter struggles to cope with the loss of her brother, while my oldest son tries to remain strength for the entire family despite his own pain. My mother passed away 2 years after Amir, November the 10th, 2016, and I firmly believe her death was a result of the grief she carried. We are all hurting. Amir's death has irreparably altered our lives. Despite feeling overwhelmed and heartbroken at times, I'm driven to keep Amir's memory alive. This journey is a daily struggle, but I'm growing stronger as the backbone for his siblings, Tion and Patria. I remain committed to honoring Amir's legacy. The anguish of losing my son is empowering me to speak out, utilizing my voice to acknowledge the significance of our children's lives within their families and the communities. Law enforcement officials must be held to the same standards as civilians, as they are not above the law. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rhonda Dormius. I want to start out by thanking Clinton Allen's mommy, Colette Flanagan, for bringing all these impacted stories into this space. This energy that we emit in this collective is what we need from time to time to boost our strength. I also want to thank the Coalition of Concerned Mothers for bringing me into this fight, leading me, helping me, which included Marion Gray Hopkins, Greta Carter Willis, and Darlene Kane. I don't know where she is, but they're the reason that I'm in this fight. Okay, so hello, my name is Rhonda Dormis. I'm from Harlem. I've been living in Maryland for 38 years. I'm a retired paramedic and registered nurse. I'm the mother of 4 children and the grandmother of 13 grandchildren. 9 years ago, I lost my 23-year-old daughter, Corinne Gaines, to Tactical Officer Corporal Royce Ruby of the Baltimore County Police Department. Corinne was my second daughter and third child. She was my most outspoken child when she realized she had a voice. She did well in school, she was well behaved, and she was honest, direct, and matter of fact. She did well in school. She began competitive swimming while in high school, as well as becoming a debate team member. Corinne was feisty but sweet. She loved to read and would read anything. I would buy her at least 10 books a week, and she would be in her room, lying on her stomach with her feet in the air, reading. She read from any genre that I gave her. Corinne grew into a young businesswoman and property owner. She was 23. The death of Freddie Gray thrust my daughter into political science. She wanted to know, wait a minute. She began independently educating herself, trying to understand the system that we lived under and its history. She was overwhelmed and hurt by the things that she was witnessing in her own backyard. She began to speak up online about the injustices via her poetry. She had many social media followers who engaged her and offered her encouragement. In the early hours of August 1st, 2016, I woke up and found I had missed a call from Corinne. I called her back. She said someone was trying to gain entry into her apartment with a key. I panicked because I knew she owned a shotgun. I said, be careful, don't do anything, please. The line went dead. A special report came across the television that a hostage situation was in progress. I suddenly realized the apartments were Corinne's. Calls started coming in. I was frantic and I rushed to her residence. I called her therapist. I had her on the phone as I approached the scene. I introduced myself to the officer in charge, who took my phone and hung it up, saying, if I need to speak to anyone, I'll let you know. And I didn't get my phone back for 3 days. And these people were communicating with my family as though that it was me. It was about 8 family members there at the church, which was a command staging area, they called it. We were continuously reassured that the outcome would be positive. Corinne was on Facebook Live with her son Cody, pleading her case while the SWAT team stood in her open door. About 5 to 6 hours passed, the live stream stopped. My nephew said they must have shut it down. The officers that were in the command center with us left. It was like her page didn't even exist anymore. I exited the building because I wanted to know what was going on. Outside, I met with the commanding officer. He said, she's gone. And I said, what? I asked him, are you saying you killed my baby? I just remember falling to my knees. But what snapped me back was, he said that my grandson was shot as well. They shot my grandson, who was 5, twice. All that seemed like in a single minute, and they shot my baby in her back. The officer lied and said that he saw her aiming a shotgun at her. He shot her blindly through a wall, trying to miss my grandson by aiming at her head. These are his words. But how could he have seen her aiming a shotgun at her and he shot her in her back? He then went in and shot her 3 more times, sent a mass while she was already down on the ground. That's when my grandson was shot again. So I had to leave. I had to leave the scene. My family was there. Everybody was hysterical. Get to the hospital to reassure my grandson that he was going to be okay. Got him into the operating room, waited it out. And I didn't know where I was going to go from there. I just never expected to be in a situation like that. You know, but then again, I had the mothers come by my side after everything was said and done, and they encouraged me and let me know that the fight is just beginning, but they were going to be with me, you know, for the long haul, which they still are. Fortunately, our family unfortunately, we didn't get a criminal suit, but we got a civil suit. The civil suit was awarded in 2018. My daughter was killed in 2016. The judge awarded my family $38 million for wrongful death, only to have the presiding judge, Mickey Norman, overturn the verdict based on qualified immunity. Here goes that again. Qualified immunity was placed on the table from the onset, and he said it wasn't a qualified immunity case. But because he didn't think that we were going to win, and because he thought that things that came out wouldn't have, he decided he was going to impose his will on the trial. Fortunately, we went to the appellate court, and the appellate court went through everything with a fine-tooth comb and found that everything was legit, that nothing had been done wrong to allow him to overturn my case. You know, but we still had a fight because he refused to recuse himself. He decided he was going to come out of retirement to handle my case. So my lawyer, J. Wendell Gordon, he put up the big fight and took it to the county executive, and he said, you guys got to do what's right. You know, you can't keep bringing, you know, drudging this family through this kind of pain, because it can kill you. People do not understand that this kind of pain can take you out. I have witnessed it, you know, and the impact that it has on the family is insurmountable. You know, my kids are destroyed. You know, you don't know from one day to the next what kind of call you're going to get from distress. You know, it's just overwhelming. You know, but I just like to finish up with this. We have to stay vigilant. We cannot give up. For those who have not seen any semblance of justice, hold on. Hold on. Because he's the way maker. We may not see it in our lifetime, but listen, people will pay for their wrongdoing. That's right. They will pay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everything you do. Just two clarifying questions at this moment. Let me see if I can make sure I get it. The first one was about, Kathy, you mentioned an organization that shows up to protect the police department. Were you talking about an organization from within the police department? Is this an organization of like community vigilantes? Is it the FBI, a combination of those? I want to get a little more clarity on that.
It's a vigilante. I call it vigilante, but it's actually mothers, African American mostly, and some, you know, Asians and Hispanics, whose children were killed. And they have a nonprofit that is funded by the police. They meet with the police. And when my grandson was first murdered, they contacted me and my daughter, and his mother about joining, being a part of them, until I started, you know, saying, no, because the police killed my grandson. Why would I meet with you guys? You know, they were meeting at a hospital or somewhere like that. And the main police officer who lied to get my son convicted, who had spent 24 years in prison for something he didn't do, was put on my grandson's murder case. And he was the one meeting with them. And they said, oh, Officer Madeira, we meet with him every week. We want you to come. They were calling me at home. And I think they were being told to call me because I'm online talking about the police. And yeah, they were calling me to come and join them. And this vigilante committee was responsible for the overturning of our first African American district attorney, a female in Alameda County in Oakland. Alameda County, which Oakland's the center of. Okay, they just recalled her. Because she was beginning to investigate the sex trafficking that was going on in that park. She said that would be her priority when she got in office. And the media and the MAGA people, the people supporting her, made sure that she did not stay in office. So they just recalled her. And they put another African-American female that they can work with.
Right.
You know,
Gatekeepers, as we've talked about today, of sorts. So this is basically an informal group,
yeah,
some sort of bizarre notion of working with police.
yeah, and they're funded by people who have money. They're well, anyway, the recall was
Reform, yes.
yeah, and
It's happened all
they
over
took our family to the district attorney when my grandson was first murdered to get what do you call it, victims compensation or whatever, you know. Well, his mother got, you know, but they offered us psychology and going to see a psychologist. But this was to get us away from that, where I was going with the fact that no, the police actually killed my grandson.
Yeah.
You know, and I have never been quiet about that. And the police have never said to me, we didn't kill him. They tell people from the community to come and threaten me, but they themselves will not sit in front of my face and call me a liar or try to threaten me.
And just to be clear, what they're saying is somebody else in the community killed your grandson. We know who it is, but we can't arrest him. Is that what I heard?
That's what his mother said they told her. They also told her, don't say he was lured to the park. That's the first thing they told her after he was killed. And they, you know, we went down to the police station. They did not speak to me, only to her. They told her, don't say that he was lured to the park, which is why I say he was lured to the park, you know?
Appreciate you. Thank you.
And they also took his organs. So I want to put that out there, that, you know, when our young people lives are taken, and they're taking their organs.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate your testimony and all of you, and I think what's being highlighted for me is just like the multi-layered systemic complexity of the issue, because your son was put away wrongfully using a racist and ineffective 3 strikes law,
Right.
which then now they are using that to harass the family of a man who's already been harassed and you know, his rights taken away. And so, you know, I think when we sit around and talk about policy changes and reforming the system, I think things like this make me think that we got to go way beyond that. It's not about just getting one law passed or getting rid of one bad officer, because the entire system is
It's
rigged.
systematic, yeah. And John Legend, I'm gonna say this and then shut up, but John Legend said that there are people who go visit their sons in prison and then go right to the graveyard and visit their loved ones.
Yeah.
And that was so true. That is so true.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing. I think the system is designed to dehumanize us, particularly people who come into very close contact with it.
Yeah.
And I just applaud you for keeping your humanity and your heart right out front, because that's the only thing that's gonna break through the wall that so many people try to build up. So thank you so much to each of you.
I wrote a book about it. A Nation of Laws, Just Us in the Homeland.
What is it called again? A Nation of Laws?
Huh?
What is the book called again?
A Nation of Laws, Just Us in the Homeland.
Laws.
A nation of flaws, just us in the homeland. So that's why, another reason, I don't care whether they like me or not, because I really don't like them.
Thank y'all again for sharing. everything.
Let me say one more
Go ahead,
thing, because I feel terrible. I'm also a member of the Say Her Name organization who focus specifically on women, and they have and continue to be a huge support in my life. So I just want to make sure that I included them.
I'm gonna make a statement as the ladies are walking off, and thank y'all again, because I know we've been having a lot of questions around the direction, the work, you know, what's next, what are we doing, but I will be remiss in just, you know, this organization is called Mothers Against Police Brutality. We've heard testimony today from some mothers who lost their only child. We've heard statements today from some mothers who have more than one child, and you're still out here fighting. And I know all too well what a lot of parents and the mothers are going through when you're still trying to fight, you're trying to grieve, you're trying to show up for the other siblings and the rest of your family, and you're doing all of the things. So I don't want to let that really fall too far away from the conversation, because it's a part of the conversation. And I think as we think through what the fight looks like, I encourage you all to not just I work for, I do legal advocacy, but at the same time, what do you guys need to keep going personally? Like your spirit, your flesh, your soul. And I think that maybe we don't put that much enough emphasis on that part, because the grieving comes in so many directions. And it's a lot when you're trying to deal with your own emotions, show up for your children when they have their own events and they're growing and you know what I'm saying? They get married, the sister gets married and move on. That's a lot to deal with. So just wanted to really acknowledge that too, because from this panel, even the previous one, a few times we've actually heard that, but I didn't really get into the questions around how you guys dealing with that. So it doesn't have to be answered, because I know that's a lot more trickier to address. And then also, I don't want, y'all gonna beat me up when I say this, but I'm gonna say it though. Y'all gonna beat me up. For the mother that is advocating for your loved ones, I know a few of y'all I spoke to, when do you slow down and pass the torch? So that's another thing. You sat at the front, that's your fault. No, I'm joking. But no, I'm not, and I say that almost envious, sitting here envious as a brother who's had to fight with my sister and not having the parent, right? And same thing, we look at my brother's kids and we tell them, like, hey, well, y'all old enough, this is what we doing now. Y'all gotta get them, you know what I'm saying? But anyways, just wanted to say that piece, and I don't want to take up too much more time. But that is a real thing of dealing with that grief in multiple aspects and not just the loss.
Let's give them a hand once again, and thank you for your testimony. I want to uplift something that's included within your program. It's the third paragraph. In the interior, under the picture of Clinton Allen. It says in the 10-year period, 2015 through 2024, the Washington Post counted more than 11,000 people shot to death by U.S. law enforcement. More than 3 on average people gunned down by police officers each day for 3,650 days. The Post tally is a conservative estimate of death at the hands of law enforcement. It does not include people killed in high-speed chases, choked to death, beaten to death, or those who suffocated face down in the dirt with an officer's knee pressing down on their neck. I wanted to pause and to bring that forward. It's so vitally important that we recognize that we will really never truly know the magnitude of the harm of police brutality. It reminds me of this. When I was in Glendora, Mississippi, the site of the killing of Emmett Till, my wife and I have led civil rights pilgrimages through the Deep South for nearly 20 years. One of the things spoken to us by the people who grew up in the Delta was that there was nothing exceptional about Emmett Till, which caused us pause. What do you mean that there was nothing exceptional about Emmett Till? And these were their words. They said, son, we were always pulling bodies from the water. You will never truly know the magnitude of the lives lost in this nation. There is, as James Baldwin would say, a bloody catalog. And this is what I hear, that in their final moments, our loved ones were hunted. In our final moments, they were harmed. And in their final moments, they were abandoned. And I heard that the harm even extended as they transitioned from this life to the next. Not even granted the dignity of being given their last rites. How morally corrupt a system we have, that even when transitioning to the next, we're not given the peace of that journey. Philosophically, epistemology talks about sites of knowledge, where we know, where we understand, where we carry intelligence. And even in the body, we find a site of knowledge that informs us beyond words of the weight that we carry. And so I cannot thank you enough for offering these testimonies today, the knowledge and the weight in which they carry, and the challenge that they offer to us to work to minimize harm and build a more peaceable and just society. We're going to receive now, which is our final panel of the day. And we thank you in advance for the courage of your testimony. Also want to thank our respondents. Will you give them a hand for their very careful listening and analysis of these stories, and even the empathy shared. Dorothy Coop Elliott, is that correct? Copp Elliott, thank you. Honoring Archie Elliott III, District Heights, Maryland. I'll need your help here. Kelly Gaysar, honoring Bijan Gaysar. And then we have Reverend Dr. Greta Willis honoring Kevin L. Cooper. So let's start again. Archie Elliott III. Say his name.
Archie Elliott III.
Say his name.
Archie Elliott III.
Say his name.
Archie Elliott III.
Bijan Gaysar.
Bijan Gaysar.
Bijan Gaysar.
Bijan Gaysar.
Bijan Gaysar.
Bijan Gaysar.
We say his name. And Kelly L. Cooper.
Kevin L. Cooper.
Excuse me. Kevin L. Cooper.
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 We also say his name. Welcome them as they come. Thank you so much. As they are coming, does anyone just need to stand a brief moment? Let's stand. Come on. And we're going to see ourselves together across the finish line. But we want to be fully present for these testimonies. Let us be seated.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy that you're here, and it's really sad to hear all of these stories that are being told, but we have to tell them. I'm the mother of Archie Elliott III. I am a retired secondary teacher and a realtor with a large brokerage in the metro area. My son was 24 years old when he was violently killed by 2 Maryland police officers, just 12 miles from the nation's capital. Archie was known as Artie by family and friends. He was a fun-loving young man who was always smiling. People were drawn to him, to his warmth and pleasant demeanor. He was looking forward to the future, finding the right girl and starting a family. Artie attended Virginia State University for a short period of time. He adored his mother and his younger brother. Early on, I decided that my son would not be just a statistic. He lived for 24 years and he brought great joy to us, and his legacy lives on. Losing Artie turned my world upside down. When he left home on a Thursday evening to plan my birthday party, 2 days later, I never dreamed I would not see him alive again. Artie was less than 3 minutes from home when his vehicle was pulled over by District Heights Municipal Officer Jason Levitt, who was white. Officer Levitt administered sobriety tests, which Artie failed. He was wearing only cut-off shorts, tennis shoes. He had been searched by Officer Levitt. No contraband was found. He was coming home from his construction job in Virginia. After being stopped by Officer Levitt, Artie obeyed Levitt's command. The backup officer was Prince George's County, Maryland Officer Wayne Chaney, who is Black. At first, Artie was handcuffed and left sitting on the curb in a residential area. They then placed him in the front seat of a police cruiser, hands still cuffed behind his back with the seatbelt on. They alleged that Artie was pointing a handgun at them. They discharged their weapons 22 times, with 14 bullets piercing my son's 160-pound, 6'1" frame. Artie posed no threat to the officers. His only offense was to have been driving while intoxicated. Artie should have been taken to jail since he was handcuffed behind his back and placed in the police car. After a 7-month investigation by Prince George's Police Department, the officers were not indicted. DOJ sided with the officers. Again, you're going to hear this word about qualified immunity. DOJ declared it a non-prosecutorial case. In our civil suit, the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia, ruled qualified immunity cleared the officers of any wrongdoing. The renowned constitutional professor Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School took our son's case pro bono to the U.S. Supreme Court. The High Court declined to hear the case without comment, which is usual. The county attorneys for the 2 officers sent us a 1-paragraph letter offering the Elliott family a $25,000 confidential settlement to close our civil suit against the county. We refused. One of the biggest legal setbacks was at the sudden death of our attorney, R. Kenneth Munday, a dynamic Washington lawyer who defended former Washington Marion Barry. We believe we were failed by Prince George's County Police Department, the Internal Affairs Department, the Homicide Division, the Grand Jury, and DOJ in getting justice for our son. I know a lot of people believe that the DOJ might work wonders and might get them justice, but don't count on it. The officers should have been held accountable for the barbaric killing of Artie. Cops showed compassion to former Governor Paris Glendenning's intoxicated son, who was given a safe ride home, 1999. as well as to former Vice President Al Gore's intoxicated son in 2007. For more than 30 years, the Elliott family and their supporters have taken the following actions and many others to remind Prince George's County of their failure to prosecute criminal cops. Number one, a prayer vigil was held every 18th of the month at the site where Artie was killed. The vigils were held for 6 consecutive months. The media would meet us at the site a lot of times to ask questions, but Judge Archie Elliott and I walked that area in the neighborhood trying to canvass and see what witnesses saw on that particular day. They heard firecrackers, but a lot of people didn't know that it was the gunshots that had killed my son. Number two, we testified several times against the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights at the Capitol in Annapolis, Maryland. I'm thankful to say that Leobor was repealed in 2021. Number three, we convened a 2-day march to Annapolis to petition the governor to appoint a special prosecutor to handle all homicides by police. Some of the county attorney general said, well, we don't need that. We already have a special prosecutor. But when they're very friendly and chummy with the police officers, how are you going to get justice? And it's like my artist father said, if you can't get justice from the highest court in the land, who are you going to turn to? Number four, I founded the Archie Elliott III Scholarship Fund in 1996 to give aid to minority high school students who attended HBCUs. We started slow, but in just 4 years, we have awarded nearly $15,000 in scholarships. This young lady her daughter received a scholarship. How much was it for? How much was her scholarship? 2,000, wasn't it?
I believe.
Yeah, I think it was 2,000.
And she's now a junior.
Very good. One last statement. Our petition in 2020 to have Artie's case reopened was unsuccessful. We are still seeking justice after 32 years, like Merle Evers. My life has been a whirlwind of grief, anger, and loss as I navigated the heinous death of Artie. But throughout the years of struggle, my faith has been that I'm making a difference in the lives of other mothers and families who have suffered the same tragedy. For us, it's never over. Amen.
Hi everyone, my name is Kelly Gaysar. I am Bijan Gaysar's mom. My son was 25 years old. He was a college graduate, an accountant. He played football, lacrosse. He was an athlete. He loved to watch football. And he was a Patriots fan. And he was my person. I have no shame in saying that Bijan was my favorite human. There's never going to be one like him. He was the kindest, funnest human that I know. Bijan never even had a speeding ticket. He was rear-ended outside of Washington, D.C., off of GW Parkway by another vehicle, which ultimately that driver was given a citation for the accident. For whatever the reason, which I believe Bijan didn't even know he was rear-ended because he always had his music very, very loud in his car. He drove away. The other vehicle was an Uber driver, and the passenger called the police. She called 911. and said that they were in an accident and Bijan was at fault, which he wasn't. He was rear-ended. And they kept following his car, the Uber driver and with the passenger. In Washington, D.C. area, San Francisco, and New York, there is a police force called the Park Police, which they are in charge of securing the monuments. But they also have jurisdiction over some areas. So 2 Park Police officers, Alejandro Amaya and Lucas Vineyard, spotted my son's car, whose license plate also was his name, Bijan. And there is no place to pull over on GW. There's only 2 lanes. So as soon as there was an opening, he pulled over, and they rushed to his car with guns drawn. They banged their weapon to his window and pointed the gun at him. Obviously, my son, who's anti-gun, anti-conflict, anti-war, he drove away. Because I'm sure in his mind he knew they're going to kill him anyways. So he drove away. So they pursued, and by then, Fairfax Police was also in the pursuit. At the second stop, Bijan pulled over and they started kicking his car and pulling at his door. So he drove away again. At the third stop, he tried to stop. I mean, I know my son. He tried to stop and give them chances not to be so violent. So at the third stop, these officers shot my son 10 times. He was shot in the head 7 times. This happened at little after 7 o'clock on November 17, 2017. Around 1:15 in the morning, I got a knock on the door, and there were 2 Park Police detectives who came to our door, and they said, is this the Gaysar residence? I said, yes. They did not say his name because they didn't even want to acknowledge that they knew who he was, that they wanted to pretend that they were still investigating the person, which his name was on the plate. He had his wallet. And later, from the nurses and doctors at the hospital, we found out that exactly when this happened and he was being transferred to the hospital, they notified the organ donation organization that because he was an organ donor. So they knew he was a donor, they had his credentials, they had his license and everything. Anyways, the way they had me identify my son was that he had a tattoo on his torso of a Rumi poem. It was a love poem. It was a poem he had tattooed after he fell in love for the first time, long ago. And this was in Farsi. And so they had a snapshot of Bijan's torso that they wanted me to identify. This case was so racial from the beginning to the whole time. And the 2 officers, well, we'll go back to that. We'll continue that night. So they gave me a phone number of the doctor who was treating Bijan. And so I called the number, and she said, Mrs. Gaysar, just come to the hospital because I don't think your son is going to last long. We want to see him. Come. So my husband and I got in the car, went to the emergency room at Fairfax Hospital. And when we got there, she met us and she said, your son's in purgatory. So, okay, can we see our son? No. Why not? Because the park police is not allowing you to visit with your son. Why? Because he's evidence. Okay. So obviously we started to fight and get mad, and so they called the hospital lawyers. I called my friend's husband who was a lawyer. I called my friend who was a doctor, a surgeon at the hospital where Bijan was staying at. Anyways, a few hours later, they gave us 5 minutes to visit with our dying son, and we were not allowed to touch him because he was evidence. After we saw Bijan and he was all bandaged up, we could not see his face at all. And so the same doctor said, if he has siblings, if you have family, please call them to come. So we called our daughter who lives in New York to come, and Bijan lived for another 10 days. On the third day, oh, by the way, these detectives that showed up to our house, they were supposed to meet us at the hospital, and they didn't even tell us that he was shot by the police. They said he was in a shootout. And I said, it cannot be, because my son doesn't own guns. He's an anti-gun activist. So that's when I knew there was something totally wrong with this picture. We never saw these detectives or any other detectives ever again. The second day in the hospital, we hired my friend's husband as our lawyer, just temporary. And I started calling the number on the cards of the park police officers, and it kept going on voicemail. And Bijan was shot on Friday, and nobody would answer my call. So finally, one of these detectives called me, and he said, well, Mrs. Gaysar, we are not working till Monday, and you can call us on Monday. And I said, you know what? I will not be calling you. I will have my lawyers call you, and don't ever forget who you work for. So I hung up the phone, and after we had this conversation, the same night, 7 FBI agents showed up to the waiting area where we were staying. And they introduced themselves as Civil Rights Division of Department of Justice and the FBI team that was working with them. They said that there was a video, they've seen the dash cam video, and they're going to be advocating for Bijan and our case. They were very sorry, and they took over the investigation. We thought, okay, great. They're going to be helping us. No. They were our handlers, okay? FBI agents who work for Department of Justice, ladies and gentlemen, are handlers. They're not investigators. They're not there to help you. They don't care about you. They don't care about us. Anyways, after 2 years of supposedly investigating, the Department of Justice refused to indict these officers. By then, we were in a heavy-duty lawsuit with the government. We hired an army of lawyers who were ex-Department of Justice lawyers and civil rights activists. Living in Washington does have its perks. And we held vigils, which Niaz and Colette and John attended. They've been there with us since the very beginning. Our son died 10 days later in the hospital. In his last breaths, I could not hold him. I could not console him. I could not touch him. This haunts me to the last days of my life. Bijan's case very quickly turned very racial. We were just, this case was, actually I was talking to a Washington Post writer that wrote about Bijan's case almost 30 times. It was just, we got so immune to the corruption, cover-up, and roadblocks. After the Department of Justice refused to take this case, Fairfax County decided to take the case against the federal government. Fairfax County is where we reside and where this shooting happened. They held a grand jury and the cops were indicted. Park police are federal police. So they took the case to the federal court. The judge residing over the criminal case over the federal court, Judge Cloud Hilton, a 32-year-old conservative judge, also resided over our civil case. He dismissed the criminal case because of their qualified immunity. He also wrote an opinion that this shooting was necessary and just. He's the guy who's also residing over our civil case. Eventually, after a few years, and then the Fairfax County prosecutors appealed the case on the Fourth Circuit. But that time, Biden was the president, and it had been almost 6 months. Bill Barr, who was Trump's Attorney General during Bijan's case when the Department of Justice refused to take the criminal case, he wrote an opinion to the Fourth Circuit in favor of the officers. Ex-US General Attorney. That's how political this case became. And our own Virginia attorney, general attorney, he dismissed the case himself in the fourth court. I'm losing my mind right now. So we settled our civil case. We did not get a justice for Bijan's criminal case. We settled. And way before the settlement, right after Bijan's passing, we had started a foundation. And from the beginning, we knew everything from the settlement would go into the foundation. We have Bijan Qaisar Foundation. I'm the president of Bijan Qaisar Foundation. I do advocacy work for my goal, my lifelong goal is to abolish qualified immunity. Thank you. Thank you. I have lobbyists working on legislation, very difficult. Even the Biden Administration did not want to touch it, and there are several things I like to tell you where we held many, many demonstrations and vigils in DC. I know you all know about this. Thank you. I know you all know everything I want to say. First of all, these police unions are not unions. They're the mafia. Okay, let's get this right. Can we just call them the mafia? And then, if we think we have rights, we don't. We're all living proofs here that we don't have any rights in this country. From my 6-year fight with the United States of America, I found out that the laws are written in a way that citizens have no rights. Okay? So this is where we are. We keep fighting, we keep pushing, and many people ask me, how do you do this? How do you get on and do you? First of all, I like to give my son all the credit. I'm very spiritual, and I know Bijan is with me 24/7. I know he's looking through my eyes. I know he's in my heart, and I know he takes care of me, gives me courage, love, empathy. And through all the pain, also becomes this great empathy, because you know pain, you know injustice. And I don't want to be bitter, and I think we can resolve everything through fighting and love. And thank you. Thank you, Mothers Against Violence.
Greetings. Once again, good afternoon to everyone. And we are here, as she just spoke, because of love. And the portion I say, because of love, thank you to Colette for her tenacity, that she had brought together strong mothers, that we can stand in the face of adversity. This month of March is dedicated for the woman. It shows our persistence and our dedication, that we can stand strong and continue to persevere in the midst of tragedy, that we can persevere in the midst of a storm, because we surely don't look like what we have been through. So I want to thank Darlene Kane for introducing me to Marion Gray Hopkins many years ago, who introduced me to all the other mothers as well as with Colette. Through that union, one mother sharing with another mother as we go through tragedy, that we can grow strength from one another. And that's that portion where the love comes in, because we don't see our sisters down. We continue to encourage our sisters and give them the strength that we have. And that's the strength to continue to have that fortitude that we can fight another day. Because when we go through these type of tragedies, we don't want to get out of the bed. We don't want to put our clothes on and make our face up. But we know that we have to continue to be the voice and the face of the voiceless. Our children are no longer here, but we can be their voice and continue to allow their name to ring throughout this nation as a whole. My name is Reverend Dr. Greta Willis. I am the mother of Kevin L. Cooper. And I say that with a humble piece, not with a portion that I'm better, have education, or anything else. I'm just a humble servant willing to serve. My son, at 14 years old, on August the 12th of 2006, a Saturday morning, 9 a.m. in the morning, in my home, he was shot and killed in front of me by a Baltimore City police officer. After suffering a mental health crisis, yes, I called 911 for assistance because my son had been hospitalized in the past after the death of my eldest son, along with my nephew and my cousin. Kevin was a depressive child. And as he was having a mental health crisis, as being one of the ministers in the community, a voice in the community, reaching out to the community, and growing up on police that you had in the community who loved the neighbors, who knew the neighbors, that was called community policing. Little did I know that there was no more community policing, where the nice officer would come and sit down and have a conversation with you and assist you in that time of crisis. On that particular morning at 9:30 a.m., while my daughter was in Iraq fighting for our country, her brother was being murdered in his home. 2 police officers arrived at our residence. They encountered Kevin out in the backyard with no shirt on, a pair of basketball shorts, and some tennis shoes. He didn't have that shirt. He didn't have a weapon in his hand. They talked to him. After they spoke with me and they spoke with Kevin, Kevin had calmed down because he was going through his crises. He didn't need to be hospitalized. So the 2 officers stated that the call was abated. That means that the call was over. That it was over, it was done. The one officer left and the other officer stayed. He said he needed to speak with me to receive more information. So I said to Officer Roderick Mitter, who I had learned later there was only 1 year on the police force, no experience. If his life was in danger, why did his partner leave him? The call was over. It was done. As Kevin walked through from out of the backyard, we were in the basement. As he walked past myself and the officer, he began to mumble like a child, a juvenile does. They mumble. As he began to mumble, the police officer zeroed in on Kevin. I was holding my phone in one hand and my 10-month-old granddaughter in the other. The officer began to follow Kevin, and he began to jaw with him, having this conversation with a child. Now he's not a police officer. You done stooped to the level of a 14-year-old child. And I'm asking him, why are you having a conversation with my son? The call is abated. Leave my home. He continued to follow Kevin from the basement to the first floor to the second floor level. As he got on the second floor level, Kevin put his shoes on and he began to cry. The officer at this moment, now he's inviting him to have a fight, antagonizing. As opposed to de-escalation, he was escalating an incident. He was antagonizing him, taunting him. Are you a police officer who is paid to protect and serve and care? Or are you just stooped down to the level of a child? I asked him once again to please exit my home. Kevin put his tennis shoes on and he tied his tennis shoes up. And he walked downstairs and the officer was in hot pursuit behind him. He walked over into the kitchen and he picked up a plastic dustpan that I bought from the dollar store. At that moment, the officer maced him and he shot him. He shot him in his left shoulder, which went in and pierced his heart. He burst his heart but he didn't steal or kill his dreams. His dreams will continue to live on through the advocacy of myself and my family. That all occurred that particular morning. On the radio was a song, and the song was blasting, "Jesus gonna work it out." That what brought me back into reality, because I thought that I was in a dream. And I could continuously to hear in my ear, "Jesus gonna work it out." And I said, "God, how you gonna work this out? My son is going off to the hospital. How are you gonna work this incident out?" Little did I know, I didn't know that my son was deceased. No one advised me. The officer called in on his radio. He said a 1013, meaning that an officer is in distress. As he called out for his backup, that there was a shooter, I said, "You're the only shooter that's here. You just shot my son." The officers burst into my home, and as they walked over and they started running all through the house, and they was looking for a shooter, and I was screaming, "Get my son some help." As they began to close the curtains, I knew that the cover-up had began. But I know that God said that everything is covered, that he will uncover in due time. So as he began to administer the officers that came in, CPR, 2 ambulances arrived. I'm excited now. I said, "Thank you, God." But they didn't take my son. They took the officer. And I'm still screaming, "Get my son some help." Little did I know, once I came back from the police station, when I was mandated to go to make a statement at that moment, that Kevin never made it. Once they brought me back to the home from the hospital, I said, "I want to go with my son." He said, "No, you need to go and make a statement." I said, "Okay, I'll go with you so that I can go to see my son." That my son's life was already gone. But they constantly kept ensuring me that Kevin was alive and he was well, and that all would be well. But he would be charged with assault on an officer. I said, "How can Kevin be charged with assault on the officer and he never touched the officer?" He said that he struck the officer with a stick. I said, "Sir, he only had a plastic dustpan, a little plastic dustpan." At that moment, my world was right side up. Now it had turned upside down. With a twinkle that said in a blink of an eye, by 2 o'clock that afternoon, Baltimore City commanders were on television making a statement. And their big press conference was a 14-year-old murdered in his home from striking the officer, and it was a justifiable homicide. How can you justify a homicide and you never did an investigation? How can you come on TV and tell the community that the officer is justified, that it was a justifiable homicide, and no one interviewed the community? No one came out to hear what anyone else had to say. They already made their minds up that they would protect their officer at all means and through all costs. So I didn't need the phone call on February the 12th of 2007 to say that no criminal charges would be placed, because you already made that decision on August the 12th of 2006. We obtained an attorney for the civil portion of it, which we lost in the civil portion, but prior to going to court, they offered my family $10,000, in which we refused, because they wanted to place a gag order on you, that you couldn't speak any longer. I said, my son's life means more than $10,000. And every chance I get and everywhere that I go, that I will continue to speak his name. I will let everyone know about the injustice that's being done in Baltimore City by an unjust police department, a corrupt police department, a police department that we had officers that were convicted, the biggest scandal on this side of all the injustices and the corruption that was taking place. Had they listened to our family in 2006, the Freddie Gray riots wouldn't have occurred. Corinne Gaines would still be alive. So would Dale Graham would still be alive if they would listen to us in 2006 for the injustices that was taking place at Baltimore City Police Department. So I'm here with all the other mothers because my heart was broken and I truly felt responsible just from trying to get my son some help for his mental health crises. On that phone call, I didn't know that at the other end was going to come the judge, the jury, and the executioner of my son's life. Had I known that, I would have never made the call. But we can't look in hindsight. We have to just continue to keep going forward. Officer Mitter was never indicted, and our family still have not received any type of closure. I stand with all the other impacted families that are here. I'm one mother, being another voice, crying out, just as George Floyd cried out for his mother. I am here for all the sons and daughters across the country, crying out for justice and accountability, standing in the gap for all families, standing in the gap for the aunties, the uncles, the fathers, the siblings that are left behind. Out of all of this tragedy, we didn't allow it to get us down. I couldn't lay in the bed not one more day. I had to get up, and just as my son tied his tennis shoes, that I had to tie my bootstraps, cut my hair, and start from scratch. See, sometimes we had natural, then we went to perms. I had to cut the perm out of my hair and go back to my natural roots. And as I went back to my natural roots, and the strength of God gave me that fortitude to know that I can get up and I can fight another day with all the other mothers. So I say to you all, stay strong. We're going to fight this qualified immunity, and they're going to stop it. I say to you all, just as Rizpah in the Bible, if you look in 2 Samuel 13, 6 and 11, and 21, 1 through 14, she was a concubine of King Saul. She's depicted in the Bible as a devoted mother who mourns the death of her children, of her sons in particular. See, I'm a devoted mother who mourned the death of both of my sons. See, that particular story in the Bible, it teaches us about a motherly love, resilience in the face of injustice, and the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult. Remember that love wins, and if love would have saved him, he would truly live forever. Thank you all.
Thank you. I've always felt this way, but more and more in the last few months, as we kind of see the ugly side of this that we all knew come to light for other people. I just wish that more people could hear what I hear, could feel what I feel, and I think all of you in this room are a big part of that. So please just keep speaking your truths, because there are people who are going to hear you and who are going to feel you. And I think that's a big part of how we move forward. So thank you again for your testimony. I want to just highlight one thing. Kelly and I are both from the Iranian community, diaspora community here in the US. And our community, I've been doing this work for a few decades, so I'm familiar, but most of our community has had different problems that they've dealt with. These are not some of the issues that they've come to the table around. And it's still very difficult because it doesn't happen often. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. What happens to us happens at the airports when we get randomly selected to be searched, when we get put on terrorist watch list. What happens to people crossing the border has the same roots as what happens to black and brown people by cops on the streets. So there's a common thread of human tragedy that brings us together, regardless of what communities we come from. And this issue, like many other issues with our justice system, impacts us all. And I think just as we've worked very hard, Kelly and I, over the last many years, to bring our community to the table around some of these issues, we have to keep working and building bridges on both sides. I know sometimes it's easy and comfortable. You want to be with people who understand you, who share your culture, who share your history and background, and that is sacred and valid. And there is space to build power with communities who haven't been around the table on this issue, so that we can have a more powerful voice, because we each bring something different to the table. So I just want to recognize Mothers Against Police Brutality for being open and receiving folks from all walks of life. I think it's the only way we move forward. And so that's my commitment, has always been my commitment to my community and other communities to try and build those bridges so that we can have a stronger presence in some of these fights. So I just want to thank you.
Today was a long day. And I think that me saying it's a long day is not a comparison to the long road. 32 years, 19 years, 16 years, it doesn't matter. As I was taking notes throughout the day and listening and trying to write out remarks and come up with something motivating to say, you know what I mean? And what resonates is your tenacity, everybody's tenacity, just the willingness to fight. And I'm a big believer in, you know, I don't want to say sacrifice, but I've always said sacrifice. I've always said, you know, I'm willing to sacrifice my personal time to learn more. I'm willing to sacrifice time to be where somebody needs me to be. And literally, as you all are talking, I looked over to my aunt's laptop. She has a sticker on it. And the sticker said, let me read it again. It said, I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. And it hit me. I was like, let me write this out now. So I was trying to hurry up and finish writing out remarks. So, Angela Davis, right? So I want to read these remarks really quickly. I'm gonna get through it, but it's who are we speaking to? Who are we fighting for? And I was mentioning earlier in the previous panel, because as an organizer in me, I'm listening to Dorothy talk and then you're giving us the steps and the 2-day march, you know, being out there, but then you even started a scholarship fund to impact someone's life. And I think all of us, again, Greta, you're talking about moving with love. None of us are in this space only because of the tragedy, excuse me. We're not. We all know families who suffer similar losses like us, and we pray for them, or we look out for them, or we try to reach out. They can't come to being in spaces like this. It's not a bad thing. They're grieving the way they grieve. But it brings me back to the sacrifice. You've all sacrificed a lot to be in this space. You've all sacrificed a lot to hold somebody else's hand and walk them along the way. I don't consider myself an expert in anything but life. I don't. I'm not sitting on an opposite table from any of you guys, right? but I've sacrificed a lot to get a certain expertise. I wanted to master because I'm tired of saying that I can't change something. So when I was writing these remarks, I'm going to shut up because I could talk a lot. I'm organized. The audience that I'm thinking of, even for folks, I know you guys are recording and live streaming. I'm going to jump into it, so I got a flight to catch too. Sorry. But today, I was really deeply moved by the testimonies we heard today. And each of the stories, this is crazy. Each of the stories is not personal tragedy, but collective call to action. The pain, the heartbreak, the courage, it's a display that is really beyond words for me. To the mothers, to the families, I know there's a lot of aunties in here too, and the loved ones that we've spoken about today, your strength is really seriously like beyond a measure. I can't put a measure to strength. You're not only standing for your children, but you're all standing for families who's been silenced by this kind of violence as well. For all those whose names we may not never hear, but whose stories are just as important, your voices are the lifeblood of the movement for justice. And it is because of your tireless advocacy that we are here today demanding that change be made. Everyone who came up on this panel, Colette, they mentioned your name, including you, Marion. They mentioned your name for a reason. Because you looked at them when they were looking for someone. I don't believe in coincidences. We didn't come together for no reason. We talk about martyrs, we talk about, it's hard to say that we're here because of losing our loved ones, but we found something to say it has to be for something. As we reflect on what we've heard, it's clear the road ahead is long and the fight is far from over. But I do believe that we're at a crucial junction. I do believe that we're witnessing a moment in which your stories, your pain, and your advocacy are gaining the attention they do deserve. But more importantly, this moment is demanding that we as society, and I think you helped me with that segue of talking about different walks of life. Society, sometimes it's bigger than just our neighbor. Sometimes it's bigger than just our block and our zip code. And I grew up sometimes thinking about all I control is what's directly around me. But we hope that society does better, or we fight to make society do better. But I think folks in this room are demanding that society does better. It's no longer enough to offer prayers and thoughts anymore. I've been seeing your faces for so many years now. Being in the space today and really listening to the stories again, some for the 10th time. I think now, Colette, what you're putting together is a pathway to real tangible action that has to be followed. I asked a question on the panel earlier, and Kathy, we talked outside, and you said, Vic, we focus on right now. Whatever's gonna come next is gonna come next, but right now, we gotta deal with qualified immunity.
Yes. Yeah.
Right now, we've gotta deal with excessive force. And I think she cheated because I told her that earlier. I said, stop, we can't do everything. But I'm serious about that. We can't do everything. Every fight is not our fight. Every fight is not our fight. And it's okay. But identifying anchors in those different subject matters, let somebody else take on that fight. That don't mean we can't support them. That don't mean we can't walk alongside them. But focus on what you're doing now. Everybody that came up here talked about qualified immunity. If that's the injustice we've got to fight, to stop people from taking our loved ones, then that's what we need to focus on right now. The last thing I'll say too is, I know you, again, back to the Congress, you guys are here on a mission, not just today. But one of the most critical aspects of moving forward is the role of Congress. The time has come for lawmakers to not only acknowledge the pain and suffering of the mothers here as well, and others, but the ones who've endured, but to stand alongside them for their fight to justice. Congress must listen to your voices, work directly with the mothers, and make real meaningful changes that prioritize the protection of all lives and the accountability for those who serve in law enforcement. This fight, it can't, I don't think it should, to be honest. I don't think it should be left to those who already lost so much, to be honest. It's not fair to you all. Yes, you're taking it on, but it's not damn fair. It shouldn't be up to you to have to go back and force them and force their hand to do their damn job. But our lawmakers must take responsibility and be active partners in ensuring that justice is not just a promise, but a reality. This movement led by you is about much more than justice that you're seeking for the ones you've lost. It's about demanding systemic change that ensures no more lives are taken in this way. We also must hold and empower accountability. We must reform the systems that perpetuate violence, and we must stand in solidarity with all those who have suffered from this injustice. And that's not an easy thing to do. And now I was writing, I like scratched out 3 more lines because I said, that ain't right. And I'm saying this because I've learned a lot listening to you all again. I sit here and say, people who know me. I have conversations. I can be a people person, and there's days where I don't want to people at all. Leave me the heck alone. And I always say to myself, and again, it's being recorded, somebody can see it later, but I don't care. I say there's pockets of people that like to deal with or not deal with for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, I know damn well when it's time for us to go to Capitol Hill, when it's time for us to talk to these Congress folks, when it's time for us to threaten them and show them that we do have more power than they think, those same people that I say I'm standing in the pockets with are the same ones I'm gonna have to call. So I just say to y'all, to all of the mothers, to everybody who's here today, I commend you, my condolences, I salute you, but focus on the now. Go kick butt, get rid of qualified immunity, and get rid of this use of force BS, excuse my language. But thank y'all, and I appreciate y'all again.
I'm gonna add one quick thing, something I've been thinking about over the last few months. I think as we see people fall back from their commitment to diversity, DEI, racial justice, whatever you call it, I'm bewildered, right? We were talking about this at lunch. There's people just falling in line without really having to, out of fear, I don't know. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, right? So keep fighting what you're doing. But I think we also would be remiss to not talk about the current context that we have to do this work in. I know it's always been risky for especially families and mothers who've been on the front lines of this on this issue. But I know this is being streamed to a wider audience. This is the time for courage. This work was never meant to be done from the comforts of our homes. Some of us, last few generations, have had the luxury and the privilege of doing this work from a relative space of safety. But people in the civil rights movement didn't have this safety. This work has always been risky. So I think we have to get even more comfortable with being uncomfortable, with being disruptive, with making other people uncomfortable, take measures to protect ourselves, but we gotta take those risks. Otherwise, nothing moves, and I just salute all of you. But I wanted to acknowledge that, because I think people are really scrambling, potentially out of fear. I don't know what it is yet, but it's not the time for that. This is the time for courage. So I thank you for having that courage and giving that courage to us.
Give all of yourselves a great big hand, if you will. You all deserve it. Thank you so much to our final panel, to our respondents. It's been my honor to serve you today and to journey with you and to bear witness to all that you have shared. I want to encourage you to know that there are people who you have never met and may never meet who are praying for you. Not just praying with their words, but praying also with their feet. You are not alone. The sheer magnitude of what you've shared today, I know I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And I believe all who have heard you will do so as well. 7 bullets, 24 bullets, 10 bullets, head, shoulder, back, heart, center mass, alley, kitchen, car, street. These heinous actions conspired to turn children into crime scenes. And we are here to reclaim their humanity. One of my heroes, a young man by the name of Tupac Amaru Shakur, offered that I suffered through the years and shed so many tears. Lord, I've lost so many peers, shed so many tears. Before that young man penned that limit of the 20th century, 2 millennia before, a young man penned it in Palestine. He captured his words in a text we now call the 56th Psalm. He wrote, "To God, you keep track of all of my sorrows. You have collected all of my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book." As we have shared today, yes, even as we have wept many tears, my imagination has shown me the divine capturing each tear. In a divine bottle. Every tear you have shed in days past, today, and in days to come. Know that they do not fall to the ground unrecognized or ignored, but that God, God's self, collects them in a bottle to bear witness to your pain and to hold you close. Yes. Until that great day, as the Revelator tells us, where that same God will wipe every tear from our eyes, and we will know pain and suffering no more. Let us stand all over, if we can. Ms. Flanagan, if you'll join me here for your words. This has been a fruitful and important and full day. And yes, it is still our intention to go and to bear witness at Black Lives Matter Plaza to declare that black lives and brown lives, they still matter. But I need you to do me a favor. Turn to the persons beside you and tell them, I see your greatness. If you're so compelled to put an arm around them, do so at this time. But tell them, I see your greatness. I see your greatness. As we affirm and celebrate each other on this day.
I want to thank everyone for coming out today. Your courage is unmeasurable, and I am in awe. Every mother that made this journey today did it out of love for their child. And for that reason, every day that we feel the pain, that we feel like we can't go on, just remember you can go on. We are going to work together like no other group has ever worked together to get qualified immunity eradicated. This is just a stepping stone. I always say that one insult to one mother is an insult to another mother and to all mothers, because we are the birth realms of this universe. If you're going to be born and leave a blueprint or footprint or an existence or a record of existence, you must come through our bodies. I just want to thank everyone again for being here. I love you all. If I didn't call you by name, charge it to this mind that is tired and not to my heart. But before I leave, I want to thank some very special people. And I always say that volunteers don't really have the time. They have families, they have jobs, obligations, but what they have is the heart. And we have some of the best MAPB volunteers. I want to thank Dana, who is a ride or die. Tabitha and her group she brought in, her family have been just wonderful. Tabitha runs Facebook pages. I want to thank Shankisha. She finally made it. She's always there by our sides. And Allie, boy, I tell you, my new adopted daughter and friend. She is like a tornado wrapped in a tsunami. She is awesome. She made so much of this possible for you, working day and night. And I just want to thank you, Allie, for that. But last, but certainly not least, before I have John to come up to give a few words, John Fullerwater, who is my north and my south. My best friend, my brother, my confidant. And some things, sometimes because he is my brother, I have to share personal things, and he's like, okay, cool, yeah, that's a little bit too much. It's like, I'm sorry, but you're my friend. John is one of the best people that I know, co-founder of MAPB, and we've had many, many, many nights just brainstorming in hours. He's the best person I know. Thank you, my dear Benjamin, for being here today, who started us on this path of coming to Washington in 2015. Yes. I got the call from her in 2015, and I was like, who is this little dynamite lady? And everyone was like, you don't know my dear Benjamin? Oh my God, she's awesome. And they were right, she's wonderful. She said, listen, I believe in what you're doing. I know you don't know me, I don't know you, but I've been checking you out, and I want to get behind some moms, and I want you to lead it for me. And she was just wonderful, and she started this. She laid the foundation for us to come back through here. And I'm so grateful for that, because we build on that Washington legacy through Medea and Pink, Code Pink, and thank you so much for that. Ty Berry, her partner in crime, who is just so much fun. That's another story, y'all. He's and a great cook. And Ann Wright, Colonel Ann Wright, thank you for everything, for all of your advocacy. I'm going to turn it over to John now, but just know in my heart that I love you all forever, and I'm here for each and every one of you. Thank you again.
Well, after a 5-hour hearing, I'm sure you want to hear a few words from the oldest white man in the room. sometimes Colette will ask me to substitute for her at something, and I'll say, I'm here with Mothers Against Police Brutality, and there'll be like a pause, you know? And I'll say, I'm not Colette Flanagan. You're probably thinking, what's Santa Claus doing up here, you know? But, which brings me to laughing at powerful people. It's not trivial to laugh at them. We need to laugh at them. It's a tragic comedy, but don't miss the comedy. And it also deflates them. It deflates them, you know? You punch up for comedy to deflate them, okay? Anyway, I just want to say logistically, we're just all going to make our way to the plaza, right? For those of you who don't want to walk over there, and it's not too far, but for those of you who don't want to walk over there for whatever reason, there are some cabs in front of the hotel, and we can arrange that for you, okay? If anyone's here that was going to record a videotape, we have the room later, and if you'll go to the plaza with us and come back, we'll make that available, okay? And I don't know if Colette said Christian's name, but Christian Vasquez is our videographer over there. And Marion, of course, for organizing, you know, everything she's done. But come on.
No, I have a question. There are some moms here who wanted the opportunity to share their story. I know we were going to do it between the 2 and the 4, and we didn't. We get a chance. Are we still? Is that still?
That's still an opportunity. What I was saying, we want to go on over to the plaza now, and we'll come back and we can do those then. And we already arranged to keep everything together for that. Okay, so we're going to make that. If you don't want to go over there, you can just wait for a while, you know. Thank you. We do want to thank Bijan Gaizar Foundation for helping MAPB with this and other events. And so we don't want to let that go unthanked. All right, we'll see y'all over at the plaza in just a few minutes. We can walk over together. They'll think it's a protest. And it is.